The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
There was a young couple in Israel that got married, and they purchased a small little apartment which was perfect for them. But as the years passed and their family grew, the apartment became terribly small. 4 children, 5 children, 7 children, this little tiny apartment. And life became impossible. There was no room for beds, for chairs. There was no room to live. The issue was that they were very poor, and they couldn't afford a larger apartment. They couldn't even afford to extend the apartment they were in. And they really had no way to access money. Their families were not wealthy. They couldn't borrow it because they couldn't pay it back. And things went from bad to worse. It got to a point where life was just intolerable. And one day the fellow sits down with his Rabbi and he says to him, he pours out his heart. He says, we can't live. Our apartment is so tiny and our mishpacha, Baruch Hashem, is large, and we have no way out of this. What should we do? And the Rabbi says, I would love to help you, but I myself struggle financially. But I do know that every Jewish person does have one key to salvation, and that's tefillah. Go to the Kaisel HaMaravi, the holiest place on earth, and pray, daven to the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'shtapchus hanefesh, put it all out there, and you never know. Hashem's salvation could come in the blink of an eye. The fellow takes it to heart. He goes to the Kaisel, takes out a tehillim, he sits down by the wall, and he begins to daven, he begins to plea, he begins to cry. About a half hour in, his face is drenched with tears. He feels a tap on his shoulder. He turns around, and there's a man standing there, a stranger. And the man says to him, what's wrong? You're crying so bitterly. And in a moment of vulnerability, he says, you really want to know? And he shares his whole story, how we have Baruch Hashem as a beautiful, large family in such a small apartment. He just can't. The fellow says, you know what? I'm a man of means. I'm moved by your plight. Here's my contact information. Reach out to me. I'm going to try to help you. And within the next few days, the fellow gives him enough money to make a massive extension that would give him living quarters that were plenty large for the situation he was in, and even perhaps for the future. He comes back to the Rav and he shares the story, and the story spreads like wildfire throughout the shul, throughout the neighborhood. Wow, tefillah really worked. Yeshua Hashem clarifying. There was another fellow in the shul who also struggled financially, had a large family in a small apartment. So he goes to the Rav and he says, do you think it could work for me if I go to the Kaisel? The Rav says, sure. Tefillah is not, no one has a copyright on it. We're all children of Hashem. So he goes to the Kaisel and he begins to daven and he pours out his heart, b'shtapchas hanefesh. Half an hour in, he feels a tap on his shoulder. He can't believe it. He turns around and there's a mashulach, a beggar. Tzedakah tatzil mimavet. Gives the fellow a few shekels and he goes back to davening another half hour and he's not feeling good anymore and he goes home despondent. Hashem didn't answer him. He goes back to the Rav and he says to him, what happened? The first guy, within a half hour, HaKadosh Baruch Hu worked everything out, but me, I got a tap on my shoulder. It was a guy taking money from me, not giving me money. And the Rav smiles and the Rav says, very simple. The first fellow went there, asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that I have no way out of this. There is no way out of this that I can think of logically. Hashem, you're the only one that could help me. And he got a tap on his shoulder. And he got a Yeshua, he got an apartment. You went there to get a tap on your shoulder. And you got that. You got a tap on your shoulder. Your tefillahs were answered, but unfortunately you didn't get the apartment. You know, when it comes to davening, we all know this is not a secret, that the more we feel that we're 100% reliant on Hashem and not reliant on ourselves or others, the greater the chance we have of getting our tefillahs answered. Do you know something remarkable? That the words, the Gemara that says, Ein lanu al milismach ela al avinu shebashamayim, we have no one to rely on besides our Father in heaven, is also gematria. It's as amazing, the numerical value of Omar Elai Beni Ata Ani Hayom Yilidaticha, the pasuk in Tehillim where a person says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm your child, and you're the only one that could help me. Ani Hayom Yilidaticha. That's the first day of the rest of a person's life. Let's understand that wherever we find ourselves, wherever we are, whatever the situation, the matzah of the predicament, the more we realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the only one that ultimately could bring us salvation, the greater the chance that our Father in heaven will say, my child, I got you. Ani Hayom Yilidaticha. Today is the first day of the rest of your life.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org